The presidential election laid bare political fault lines across the country, stark divisions that can be even more intense when they involve loved ones. William Brangham looks at ways to handle this post-election stress and find a little holiday season hope.
After an election, by definition, there's a winner and there's a loser. Triumph on one side, disappointment on the other. When those two sides exist within one family, though, that can complicate any Thanksgiving or holiday gathering. My next guest has some ideas on how to navigate these tricky waters and how to find the good in others. Jamil Zaki is a professor of psychology at Stanford University and author of Hope for Cynics, The Surprising Science of Human Goodness. Jamil Zaki, so good to have you on the program. This has obviously been a tumultuous year, a very divisive election. How would you counsel someone who is potentially going to have a meal or a visit with someone who they might see as having completely contrarian views to their own? How would you counsel them to go about that?
I think, first of all, let's acknowledge that this is a hard season. It's a hard season in general, but when you add political division, it becomes even harder. So I think it's natural to feel that apprehension. But I think oftentimes we assume that people we disagree with must be far more different from us than they really are. We assume they're more extreme, more hateful, more anti democratic. And I would say that replacing some of those assumptions with curiosity about what the people in our lives actually believe is a good place to start.
So let's say you are a little bit more certain that the person across the table does have starkly differing views. Do you think it's a good idea for people to try to reach across the table metaphorically?
I think it depends how they're reaching across. Oftentimes, we try to reach across the table with a sharp left jab, focusing on trying to convince other people that we're right and they're wrong, or even that our opinions are morally superior to theirs. Well, when people see that you're trying to browbeat or convince them, guess what? They can tell, and their defenses go up. A much more powerful and connective way to reach across the table is not with statistics or opinions, but with stories. So, for instance, if somebody holds an opinion that's really different from yours, you might ask, hey, how did you come to feel that way? Research finds that when we share stories with one another, we might not end up agreeing, but we respect each other's positions more and often discover more common ground than we would otherwise.
I mean, I hear everything that you are saying, but I know you know also that sometimes people hold on to these beliefs. They will resist all of these entreaties to try to see goodness in the other because it's if affirming to their own sense of self that they believe X.
I think that's right. And it's easier, though, to do that with strangers or with people that we're not actually in contact with. If you ask folks, Democrats or Republicans, what do you think people on the other side are like? They hold on to their deep and often quite negative opinions about that other side in the abstract. When you present them with a real human being who's interested in them and wants to have a conversation, things often go differently. In my lab, we brought Republicans and Democrats together for Zoom conversations. After these conversations, we asked, how did it go? And they said it was delightful and informative. They were shocked by how reasonable and open minded the person on the other side really was. And that lowered the temperature on their own disdain or even their own hatred for the other party.
Do you think that there's some broader societal good if we as individuals do this type of a bridge building that you're describing?
We have lost sight of so much common ground that most Americans actually share, even ideologically. We imagine, because we've become so polarized, and because the media often presents extreme versions of each side, that these sides have nothing in common. If you look at people's attitudes on real political issues, it actually turns out that most Americans agree on a lot. But we don't discover that agreement if we never talk, if we avoid one another. So those conversations that we have over the holidays, they can help us build coalition, understand that there's a lot that many Americans share, and maybe start to figure out goals that we have in common and how we can work towards those goals.
Are there other things that you would suggest that people do to try to bridge these rockier divides?
The first thing that I would say is to just be a little bit humble about what you know and what you don't know. You mentioned that in some cases, I might know that my uncle or aunt has an opinion that's really different from mine. And that's true. Maybe I do know that about them, but I probably don't know that much about how they came to have that opinion. And I might not actually even be right. There was a study that occurred right after the 2016 presidential election where researchers used geotagging to figure out where people were going for Thanksgiving dinner. And when people crossed from a Republican area to a Democratic one or vice versa, they stayed at dinner for an hour less than if they were having dinner with people who agreed with them.
Oh.
We work so hard to avoid one another that we often miss out on even knowing the people in our lives. So I guess I would just say that it's important to know what we don't know. And oftentimes that's more than we want to admit.
All right, Jamil Zaki of Stanford University, thank you so much.
Thanks very much, William. It was a pleasure.